Our last speaker in this track today is David Barnholdt. David has been at CRISP for a staggering 16 years and has a background as a developer and has matured, I would say, into a transformation coach, team coach, teacher, and a trainer of product teams. David does not shy away from challenges and has proven this by working with Swedish banks, big banks such as SEB, Nordea, Swedbank, and Handelsbanken. Maybe you're our banking guy. I don't know. Maybe you have some colleagues here in the room today. I hope so. David lives on the Swedish island of Gotland, which we sometimes call our unthinkable carrier ship in the Baltic Sea. And today, David has prepared a great talk for us. So great that it needed 2 slots in the schedule. So we'll have this 30 minutes. Then we'll have a break for 10 minutes so that everyone can have another bio break, and then another 30-minute session with David if he needs it all. David, the room is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Max, for that very nice presentation. So this is not only going to be a talk, it's also going to be a workshop. So I will need you to be engaged. And you can see if you in the break if you want to continue with the workshop or you want to rather move to another session. Let's see about that. But we are the topic is effective learning strategies for you especially, but that you also can take to your team and your organization. And it will be based on the principles of inner game, which I will explain shortly. But first, I want to do a reality check with you. How many of you have felt that you're your own harshest critic in learning something new? And I want you to turn on your screens and give a thumbs up if, yes, I have been my own harshest critic when I try to learn something new. Or no, that has never happened. I'm always very positive when about myself when I learn something new. And maybe we can try and have the gallery view so we can see all your faces and thumbs. So let's see. Can you show me your thumbs? Now I'm seeing. So we have thumbs up here from some, yeah, and thumbs down from some. That's great. So for you who showing the thumbs down, maybe there's not so much for you to learn in this session. But for any one of you who have felt this challenge with that you're your own harshest critic, there will be something to get out of this workshop. So let me show you the slides again. There we have it. So as I said, there is a really interesting thought school or approach when it comes to learning that comes from a guy named Timothy Galloway. He started out as a tennis trainer in the 70s, and he had a challenge. He felt that some of his pupils were impossible. It seemed like they weren't able to learn how to play tennis at all. And he got not only frustrated, but eventually he didn't kept the energy to even try to learn them, so or teach them. So he started to just ignore them and stop even trying to teach them anything because it seemed impossible. And then he noticed something very strange, that when he didn't instruct them, when he just let them do whatever they wanted to do, they actually started to play some good tennis. All of a sudden they started to hit the balls and were able to move them over the net in a more or less correct way. And he started to think about that. How can that be? That when I don't instruct them, they actually start growing in performance. So he he wanted to go to the bottom with this and started researching and looking into what the science said, and from this he formed the pedagogue approach that I now will tell you about. So what he found out and realized that all of us has a potential when it comes to learning something, but usually it's hard to reach that potential. Your performance is don't get as high as the potential. There seem to be some kind of interference that are hindering you from reach your full potential. The performance is due to, usually when it comes to learning something, how curious you are about what you're about to learn, and how fun you have while doing it. If it's really fun and you're really curious about it, that usually approaches to learning. But there is some interference that are making your performance not fully allow you to exploit your full potential. So what is that interference? Well, one part, or actually a large part of the interference, is due to yourself, because inside us, most of us, or I would dare to say all of us, we keep an inner dialogue. There is like we have two persons in every person. One person inside us that continually talks to ourselves and comments on what we do, the inner dialogue, and he refers to that as the self one. It's critical, analytical, and instructive. It tells you what you should do and how you should do it, and it usually, unfortunately, tends to be judgmental and can create doubt and overthinking. Then there is the other part of you that actually does stuff, the doer, the self two, who execute and is connected with all your rest of the body and your active creating stuff. It's the doer is just acting. It's non-judgmental. It's intuitive and instinctual. You perform the tasks when they are at hand, and you just have to do them. So who is that self one then, the person talking inside your head? Who is it that actually is talking? Where does that inner stranger come from? So let's stop and reflect about that. Have you heard yourself? Have you heard yourself inside yourself, holding yourself back, talking about what you just do, and when did you just act and it felt fine? So take. I hope you have some paper and pen close by, and try to jot down a recent situation where you were held back by self one, and also jot down a comparable situation where the self one didn't were in the way, where you just executed and it felt really great. So we're starting the timer now, and then you will share in groups to each other about this. Okay. Hope you have written down something now to share with each other. And the purpose is to compare how you, in maybe different way, keep yourself back, how your inner critics work, and what is the common theme when you actually just can execute without your inner critic being in the way. So I'll give you 5 minutes to share with each other. So I would guess like 1 or 2 minutes per person, 1.5 minutes perhaps per person, and then maybe some closing discussions. Go ahead and enjoy. Welcome back, everybody. I hope you had a good talk and some interesting stories to listen to from each other. Is there any one who wants to give a reflection from some insights you gained during the talk with your colleagues? Just speak out, unmute yourself and speak out if there's something you want to share. While you were in the rooms, I and Max talked about this inner critic. That's you're sometimes so aware, unaware that inner critic is there because you're so used to it, and that for some it's a much stronger critic, and especially then when you're trying something new, you can hear the inner critic saying, "Oh, you can't do this. This is too hard," when you're failing, when you're trying and failing. So these strategies that Galloway developed and part of it developed and recommend is try to learn as a child. The learning is actually an inbuilt capability within us all. So we don't really have to give much effort to the actual learning process. That happens automatically. Rather, it's about how to harness it. And if you see how a child learns to walk and talk, they rarely seem to have any inner critic. They just do and try. They stumble, they fail, but they don't give up or don't think you probably that, oh, this is too hard for me. I will never learn to walk, or I will never learn to talk. They just do. So how can we try to be more like children when we learn? How can we work with our inner learning environment? Well, we need to try to silence our inner critic, that person within you that tells you that this is too hard for you, or now you failed again, you will never learn this. Rather, just do, just execute without thinking too much. And focus on the experience instead of performance. So instead of trying to do it the perfect way or trying to perform, which often stifles us, thinking about, especially about how other view us, just focus on the experience in trying to do it. What happens when you try? And that is how Galloway developed his tennis training technique. He started with just letting people feel and experience hitting the ball without even trying to get it over the net, or just throwing around the racket without even trying to hit the ball either. So just start with experiences, different emotions, and how it feels, different parts of what you in the end are finally trying to achieve. And another thing, of course, is to be present in the moment, to have your mindset focused on the experience, so you don't have a lot of other thoughts. This is where mindfulness comes in. If you're really curious about learning something, be there fully and in the moment, and practice to be non-judgmental. One very helpful thing is also to identify what he calls critical variables. What is it that you need to pay attention to in what you're trying to learn? For example, in tennis, he usually starts by having people to pay attention to how it feels to hold the racket and how it feels when the ball hits the racket, the sounds, and and then to focus on how the ball moves in the air and how it behaves when it bounces onto the ground. And so pay focus to one or a few critical variables at a time. And usually someone who's experienced with the competence that you're learning might have good ideas on what kind of critical variables you should pay attention to first. And by that way, focusing on the experience and specific aspects of the experience, it helps you make yourself conscious of things that you first wasn't aware of. Make you conscious and also develop your ability around that area. The more you focus on the ball when you learn tennis and how it moves, the more you learn automatically how you will foresee the ball's movement when you hit it with a racket. And not least important, but really important as well, is to have fun, to find the fun in what you're trying to learn. I can tell an example from myself as a teacher, where I try to exploit this in a game. I have 5 kids, and I've been driving with them, helping them to get driver's lessons. And for my oldest kid, it went as you would expect usually when you're helping your kids learn to drive. It was painful and frustrating experience for both of us. But with my youngest daughter, I applied the inner game technique in fully. And I removed the performance part by, from the beginning, instructing her directly right at the point exactly what to do. So I told her, push down the button. I was imagining myself being the driver, just using her as a remote control. So she didn't have to think about the driving. She just had to do exactly what I told her right at the point when I tell her. I didn't tell her beforehand, I just tell her right in the moment. And in that way, we could ride out in ordinary traffic almost right away. I just had to be very specific about every detail. Start your blinkers now, turn left now, go a little more right, go a little more left. And after we had done that for a number of hours, she was starting to do the things I told automatically. She had already learned that, yeah, I need to use the blinkers when I'm going to turn left or right and so forth. And it was very relaxing. After a while, I could start asking her questions that I know would be important for her to focus on, her critical variables, like what do you see? Can tell me what you see on the street, on the side of the street. Tell me about the signs you see. And we could have nice chats, and it was super fun all the way through. It was amazing, actually. So if you don't have an expert helping you how to find critical variables, you can also do it yourself. Some tips. It needs to be observable, something that you can, I can focus on this when I'm trying this time. So you can focus on it. And it must be interesting in some way. What is interesting in this I'm trying to do? Yes, it is interesting how the ball moves. Yes, and it is interesting how the other people in traffic behaves. Or it is interesting how people faces look when I'm holding this workshop, facilitating this workshop with them. So in that way, it makes it easy for you to focus on it, but because it's hard to force presence. And of course, relevant to what you're trying to achieve. Something that while you're exploring it, it also aids you in automatically learning it. After the break, I will put you in breakout rooms where you will discuss how you would deal with a situation where you have to address a sensitive issue with a coworker or discuss a performance concern with a team member. And how you can use critical variables, figure out what would be the most important critical variables in such a situation, and how can you use them to minimize the interference from your inner critic. Yes, so we can take some questions before the break. We just actually have 2 minutes left here.
And since we're only 17 people, I think if you just want to state your question straight away, just unmute yourself, turn on the video and state your question, that's fine. If you're not comfortable with that, feel free to write the question as a comment in the chat, and I will ask it for you.
Otherwise, you can also take an early break, and then we will be back 20 to... No, sorry. Max, help me out there. 4:05, right?
That's right. So we, in 1 minute, we'll take a break. The break is 10 minutes long, and we hope to see you back here at 16:05.
Let's share what you talked about. We also had a discussion about this situation. Let's hear what you...
Yeah. May I?
Yes,
Katrine here. Yeah. I had problems in really figure out what's a variable and what's just a good advice in difficult talks.
Right.
As in what to do, a good advice on what to do and what to observe.
Right.
I had difficulties in...
Have someone thought about that?
I could offer like I don't know if it's an answer, but maybe one of the what would be an outcome of the talk that you would like to see? Maybe that is a variable. Like this person will act differently after this talk, or he or she will stop or refrain from doing or acting in a certain way that he or she has done before. Maybe that's a good variable. For instance, if the person is always late for work, he starts to show up for work on time.
I would say that's a good result.
I see.
Right. So that's what you'll be aiming for. So to identify good critical variables, you need to know what is the outcome you want from discussion. And I guess either you want this person to improve his or her performance, or tell what else he or she would rather do, or maybe seek another job if this is not the right job. But you want a constructive outcome.
And you want a constructive outcome of the actual talk as well, I would say. So how would you know? Exactly. That's before you see any results. You would like to see has the person understood? How did was it received? Do I see some feelings?
Exactly. There you have a number of critical variables. So how can I see where how this person is reacting when I'm talking to him or her? Do we still keep eye contact? What does the body language say? Does he or she go into defensive mode? That's an interesting variable, and so forth.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. I think I understood now.
What signs can I look for, and that I can adopt my actions to? So if person start to be defensive, how can I work with that variable? Can I give some empathy, relate back to myself? I also have had struggles in this kind of situation or something. Make it, etc. Do you have any more reflections from your discussions, what you talked about? Tony, for example?
Well, I was in a group with Petrina, and we had exactly this discussion about what is the variables. So,
yeah, what to look for?
Yeah.
How about Alexander? Are you there, or you seem to be there, but you're muted? There's an unmute and unmute button in the left corner of the Zoom screen.
He might just have stayed in the call since he was earlier in the track. I don't know.
How about Ulf then? I think I was seeing you going in and out of a breakout room. Or Michael or Annie?
Michael should have been in our room, but he wasn't there. So he's probably one of those who were there earlier.
Bart, I see you unmuted yourself.
Yeah, I was in the group with Ulf and Alexander, but they didn't respond. They didn't respond, so I left the group.
Oh no. There should be a function for Zoom that if the person stays inactive. All right, but let me continue my presentation and take this to team and organizational level. Because now you maybe have some ideas on what you can do in your own personal learning journey to learn more like a child and to let your learning happen. And actually, if you go to team work, for example, the retrospective is a classical place where we have an opportunity to gain knowledge. And most formats when we do retrospectives are trying to avoid talking about us judging us, right? Because that is like the inner critic acting out. So we don't want to give ourselves a negative self-judgment. Much better is try to figure out what did we learn from this? What happened? And things that happened that didn't turn out the way we wanted to. What learning were there in that? And from that, how can we derive what kind of critical variables we should focus our attention to in the upcoming sprint? And using this concept of things to focus on. Well, it seemed like we didn't do much teamwork in this sprint, not as much as we have talked about doing. It was quite a lot of mostly individual work. All right, so that could be a critical variable. How often do we actually join and work together? Maybe that is something we can discuss at the daily stand-ups. How much did we work together yesterday, and how much can we do that today? And yeah, maybe start measuring that. So sometimes critical variables can be measurable, and then that's really great because then we can see if stuff is happening or not. And using the same approach for organizations is, of course, to don't be feeling bad about failures. Rather, as we tell in most of our classes, to trying to create a fail-friendly culture, like they do on Spotify, where they actually take failures seriously and celebrate all the interesting learnings that can be found when you have failed. And the only real failure is when you don't learn from your mistakes. So failing, that is just exploring, discovering stuff we didn't know, and the critical variables to focus on. So that is something you can start doing first in your team, and then see if you can make it spread to the rest of the organization. Something very related to the inner game approach is something called subject-object theory, and I would like to talk a little about that, because as I've said now several times, learning is something that is happening automatically, and it's because that the subject-object theory comes from a guy called Robert Keegan, and it's a model of how we process information. Everything we experience externally or internally is first processed unconsciously. It always goes through our subconscious before it ever becomes conscious. And everything that becomes conscious, that is stuff we can work for. They are object for us. Everything externally that we are conscious about, that we are aware about, we can do something about, as well as everything inside us that we're aware about, feelings, thoughts. We can work with them. We can do something about them. But the stuff that we are unaware of, but we are experiencing, we might be unaware of stuff that's happening around us, but still we might register it subconsciously. We might have feelings or even thoughts subconsciously that we are unaware of, but that affects us. All those things that are remaining in our subconscious, we are subject to. They affect us, but we can't do anything about them because we are unaware that they are affecting us. And learning is very much about trying to widening our perspective, to make stuff more and more conscious for us, more and more object for us, so we can do something about them. So widening our perspective, widening our conscious awareness, the width of our context in every moment, about what is happening around us as well as what's happening inside us. And the life is a process where this constantly is happening by itself. But by being aware of that process, we can help give it a better environment. Stop, and by silencing our inner critic, we open up for being more observant and taking in and getting more aware of everything we experience, both outside us in our environment, in our teams, in our organizations, and everything we do, and as well as what's happening inside us in all kinds of different environments. And I want to end this presentation with a little thing for you to think about. If you look back in your life, like 5 years, and think about it, is there something that you have got aware about now that you weren't aware about 5 years ago? And how has that increased awareness, increased consciousness, you could say, how have it helped you? And furthermore, in which areas do you think you have more to discover? There's a funny observation I heard from some researchers, that most people, when you ask them how much they changed the last 10 years or something, most people say, yeah, I changed so much. I'm so much different now from when I was 10 years ago. And then when they asked, how much do you think you will change the coming 10 years? Well, most people say, yeah, of course I will change, but not as much as I did in my last 10 years. But the actuality is, doesn't matter when you ask, in which age you ask the person, the change is always constant. You constantly become a new person. So one advice from this talk is go on and constantly explore yourself, explore your own awareness and how you can help it to grow. As last thing from this presentation, which is actually also part of one of my trainings, I would like to get a little feedback from you. Yes, I didn't mean to stop my screen sharing because I want to do a little Menti. And so you take up your phone, or if you have another screen on your laptop, and go to menti.com. And there use the code you can see here on the screen, 14245088. And tell me and everybody else here, what did you enjoy of this workshop? Do you have any challenge in finding menti.com or getting to the Mentimeter? Just shout out.
I think I managed to share a link in the chat as well, which should go to the correct Menti.
Thank you. Yeah, self-awareness. Right, Twinkles. Yeah, glad you wrote that. Reflection. Who am I? Yeah. If you want to learn more about Keegan thoughts, he has a really great book about this, an adult development theory that is written about. It's really interesting on different stages of self-perception. Yeah, be like a child. They are learning so immensely fast and without struggles, it seems, at least the first 2 or 3 years. Learning should be fun. Yeah.
I liked your reflection about the, if I may, the driving instruction, which I'm, unfortunately, I need to expose myself too soon as well. Or I'm actually already doing it with my oldest son on a motorcycle.
Oh, wow.
But I don't know if I've employed any of these techniques, but it's going quite well, but it is nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
And several times I've become very afraid when he's making mistakes in live traffic.
Yeah,
so I sympathize with your experience.
And in a sense, I mean, being learning a person how to drive a car, it's a safer thing. You at least maybe have can take the handbrake or or tell the person brake.
Yeah, that's right. There's a cage around you when you're on a motorcycle and your son is on a different motorcycle. There's nothing you can do if he doesn't stop in an intersection properly or whatever. So it's very scary, but also a lot of fun, and he's doing well. So
cool. Yeah, and one thing from this course is then maybe to figure out what could be the best critical variables in each training session that you could guide him to look for. I remember when I took my motorcycle license last year, I tried to focus at first on just my riding position, how it felt to. I knew from instructions how you were supposed to use your body and sit in different ways and use your head. But it might be usually for all you're learning something overwhelming with all these instructions. So just cut down to very few variables to look for.
Yeah, I think I'm with Petrina on this one, that it is hard to identify like good variables. You really have to think about it for a bit.
Yeah. And experiment if you can. For example, with my motorcycling, I was taught very early on that try to keep the balance in the lower part of your body. Try to hold your legs around the motorcycle instead of trying to grip the handlebars. So I was experimenting with that, doing the opposite, just trying to grip hard on the handlebars and to feel the difference. How does it feel if I hold on the handlebars and are loose with my legs, and vice versa? And that way I could get my own feedback on, yeah, it actually feels better if I use my legs more than my hands. So a critical variable can be doing the opposite of what you're supposed to do, just to feel the difference between doing the supposed right way and supposed
that is a very, very interesting observation. I watched my son take there's a traffic safety course that's mandatory that you have to take for motorcycles, and the instructor there actually did what you describe. He instructed everyone to attempt to brake in a curve, which is something you normally want to avoid, because they needed to experience what happens to the motorcycle when you do that. And that basically putting yourself at risk of crashing, because the motorcycle will raise itself up and not turn anymore unless you force it, and you will go out in the ditch.
Right. But in the safe environment of a special...
Exactly, in a safe environment. So maybe he had some of this practical skills that you're trying to teach.
Yeah, I think many experienced trainers and teachers know this just by experience. And if you're judging people, you will not get a good performance in the end. You will just hinder them from developing.
I think I used this without knowing, but in the sense that I used this to remove this negative feeling of my daughter while learning how to drive, because she was like, I would never be able to sit in a car and keep track of all this, and I have to learn and all that. I said, okay, we're not going to do anything else than just go down and sit in the car. We're not even going to drive out, but you're just sitting there. Okay, I mean, that's safe. So she went down, sat in the car, and felt that, now it's getting interesting. Maybe we should do a short drive. So at the first driving lecture, she actually did drive and gear and did everything in a safe environment, of course, from being extremely scared that she would never be able to do this.
Excellent. I mean, you have to one experience at a time. And the first thing was just for her to sit in the car and not feeling scared and afraid. And I feel it could be nice. It's actually a nice chair, and the wheel is not that big. And
yeah.
Great.